Have you ever wondered, can a single moment of being looked down upon completely change a person's destiny? A simple woman, hoping to treat herself to a small birthday gift, was dismissed and ignored in a brightly lit store. But what they didn't know was by tomorrow, that entire store would belong to her. This isn't just a story about surprise. It's a journey that redefines human worth, written with quiet strength, unwavering kindness, and inner resolve. Watch until the very end, because you just might see a part of yourself in the woman named Emma. Have you ever wondered how a single moment of being looked down on could completely change someone's life? That day, the city air was calm and gentle. Golden sunlight filtered softly through green leaves, casting a warm glow across the gleaming stone sidewalks. Emma, a simple woman with no fancy makeup, dressed in a pale blue sweater and a pair of old but clean jeans, stepped quietly into the renowned Langston and Company jewelry store. Her birthday was just around the corner. There was no one waiting to surprise her with a gift. So Emma decided to treat herself to something meaningful. Not for show, not to impress anyone, but simply to commemorate her long and tireless journey with a small token filled with memories. Perhaps a watch, not just to mark time, but to bear witness to everything she had overcome. But the moment the glass door shut behind her, Emma felt a coldness seeping through the air of that luxurious space. Crystal chandeliers rained light onto the marble floors. Gleaming showcases displayed dazzling jewels. Yet amidst all that grandeur, Emma was invisible. The well-dressed staff barely glanced at her, their eyes sliding past her as if she were a breeze. Their warm smiles were reserved for the more elegant customers, while Emma stood completely ignored. Minutes passed in suffocating silence. Finally, a young salesman approached, but his eyes sized her up in an instant. "What do you need here?" he asked, in a tone so detached that Emma could feel the unspoken message. "You don't belong here, do you?" Just as she opened her mouth to reply, his gaze was suddenly drawn to a glamorous woman in a blazing red dress, carrying a luxury handbag. Without a word of apology, he turned and walked away, leaving Emma standing alone in the gleaming space. In that moment, she felt a sharp pain rise in her chest. Not because she was denied a birthday gift, but because of how they judged her, based solely on her simple appearance. What they didn't know was that this very woman they dismissed held their future in her hands. With just one decision, she could change the fate of the entire store. And by tomorrow, they would finally understand who truly held the power over their destiny. Emma still stood there, surrounded by the dazzling brilliance of the luxury store. Yet inside her, a silent storm was rising. She didn't lash out. She had long grown used to the quiet contempt that came with superficial glances. From the earliest days of building her career, Emma had been dismissed again and again for her modest appearance and humble demeanor. She had walked into boardrooms carrying bold ideas, only to be met with cold stares from those who judged others by their suits or designer handbags. She had been sidelined during negotiations, deemed not fit for the table, simply because she didn't look like someone who belonged among the powerful. And now, at Langston and Company, she was once again facing that same disdain. But this time, something was different. Something within her, a quiet fire that had burned for years, suddenly surged with intensity. Standing among the gleaming glass displays, Emma thought of her late father, the man who once held her hand and, with a gentle smile, told her, "Sweetheart, if people judge you by your appearance, let them. At least then, you'll know exactly who they are." Those words from long ago echoed more deeply now than ever. They didn't hurt her. They healed her. They steadied her heart and lit a strength within her that felt like stone walls rising from the earth. Emma tightened her grip on the small leather bag in her hand. Her gaze sharpened, not with anger, not with pain, but with clarity. A decision had taken full form in her mind. She didn't need fake smiles or empty courtesies. She knew exactly where she stood. She knew who she was, and more importantly, she knew what she was going to do. As Emma turned and walked out of the store, the golden sunset cast its warm glow over the sidewalk, shimmering across the polished glass storefronts. Her steps were slow, but firm, as if each one was a steady drumbeat of destiny in motion. By tomorrow, everything would change. This story would be rewritten, and the fate of Langston and Company would no longer lie in the hands of those who judged by appearance, but in the hands of the very woman they had overlooked. As she drove home, the city lights began to flicker on. The fading sunset cast a golden glow across the glass towers, reflecting onto Emma's face, calm, yet resolute. She said nothing, hands steady on the wheel, but her eyes, they revealed the shape of a plan slowly taking form. The moment she stepped into her small but tidy apartment, Emma slipped off her coat, placed her leather bag on the chair, and sat down at her desk by the window. Outside, streetlights cast soft shadows on the sidewalk, but inside, her mind was brighter than ever. She opened her laptop. The screen lit up with the words, "Investment portfolio access granted," followed by a list of assets and holdings no one had ever suspected she owned. The numbers glowed silently, powerful in their stillness, just like her. Without hesitation, Emma made 2 phone calls. The first to her private attorney. "I want to finalize the purchase of the building at 83 Whitmore Avenue." The second is a real estate management firm. "I need an immediate renegotiation on the lease terms for the ground floor tenant." This week, unbeknownst to most, the building housing Langston and Company had quietly been on the market for months. Emma had been watching, but she'd never felt the need to act until today. And this wasn't impulsive. It wasn't revenge. It was a message, one she had waited her whole life to write. True elegance doesn't lie in appearance, but in how we treat one another. With just a few clicks, everything was set into motion. No spectacle, no noise, but every move carried weight. Emma leaned back in her chair, gazing into the deepening night outside. And for the first time in hours, a faint smile graced her lips. The next morning, the city bustled as usual, but in front of Langston and Company, something was happening that made time seem to slow down. A midnight blue Porsche Panamera glided in, stopping gracefully right at the store's glass entrance. The early sunlight reflected off its gleaming surface like fate itself had just awakened. Inside, the staff of Langston and Company were going about their routine, unlocking doors, adjusting velvet pillows and display cases, repositioning the white orchid vase at the reception. They prepared for another day with the same air of pride and cold detachment. And the car door opened. Emma stepped out. She didn't need a glamorous dress or flashy designer brands. She wore a perfectly tailored black suit, elegant in every stitch. Her hair was neatly tied back, and though her face bore no elaborate makeup, she radiated a presence that turned every head. On her wrist was a simple leather strap watch, the very one she had admired the day before. Only now, it rested firmly on her wrist like a silent declaration. Behind her walked a middle-aged man in a sharp suit, carrying a leather briefcase with calm precision. He was Emma's lawyer. They entered the store, and in an instant, it was as if all sound had been sucked from the room. The soft background music continued, but no one seemed to hear it anymore. Henry Clark, the store manager, froze behind the display case. His expression slowly stiffened as he recognized the woman who had been dismissed just yesterday. But today, everything about her presence was transformed. Emma stopped at the center of the store. She didn't need to say a word. She tilted her head slightly, signaling the man beside her. The lawyer opened his briefcase, drew out a thick folder, and laid it in front of Henry. Henry accepted it with a puzzled look, flipping open the first page. Within seconds, the color drained from his face like the sea receding before a tidal wave. Transfer documents, legal confirmations, stamped and sealed. Langston and Company now belonged to Emma. She lifted her chin, locking eyes with Henry. Her voice wasn't loud, but it echoed like a bell in an old cathedral. "I didn't come back to buy a watch. I came to fix what was broken. From this moment on, everything here is going to change." The entire store fell into absolute silence. The staff froze, their hands mid-motion, eyes darting between shock and confusion. No one could have imagined that the modest woman they had dismissed the day before was now the rightful owner of everything they stood inside. Henry tried to compose himself, his voice shaky and uneven. Miss, ma'am. Well, we didn't mean. Emma raised her hand, calm yet firm, cutting him off mid-sentence. You don't need to explain, she said quietly. I didn't come here for excuses. I came to clean up the culture of this place. She turned to her lawyer. He nodded, pulled out a sealed stack of envelopes, and began handing them one by one to each employee who had been present the previous day. Inside were official termination notices for those who had shown clear discrimination and unprofessional behavior toward customers. A young employee, the one whose eyes had dripped with silent contempt when looking at Emma, accepted the envelope with trembling hands. There were no angry words, no raised voices, but there was also no forgiveness for the act of judging someone solely by how they looked. Emma walked slowly past each display case, her eyes scanning the sparkling jewelry, until she stopped at the exact spot where she had stood, ignored just a day earlier. Then she turned, looking at the remaining employees. I'm not letting anyone go out of anger, she said steadily. I just need to ensure that from this day forward, no one who walks into this store will ever feel less than, simply because they're not wearing a label. Silence, but not an empty silence, a weighted one. A few heads bowed, some faces flushed with shame. There was nothing more to be said. Justice had spoken, not through harsh words, but through the kind of quiet, deliberate action that leaves the air charged with something undeniable. After the morning's upheaval, Langston and Company temporarily closed its doors. A modest sign placed on the glass entrance read, "Under renovation. We look forward to welcoming you soon." But inside, a quiet revolution was already underway. Emma didn't need a press conference. She didn't need social media headlines. She worked silently, yet with unwavering resolve. Within days, the entire store, from atmosphere to personnel, began to transform. New staff gradually arrived. Some young, some older. They came from every background, every shade of skin, every walk of life. But they all shared one thing: eyes that truly listened, and hands that handled each piece of jewelry as if it carried a customer's story within it. Emma didn't hire based on polished resumes. She chose those who understood that value isn't stitched into a handbag or a logo on a collar, but in the way you make someone feel seen and respected. The store's physical space was reimagined, too. Gone were the crowded glass displays. In their place, open, airy arrangements where each piece was gently lit like a work of art. Plush sofas replaced stiff, waiting chairs, inviting customers to sit, to talk, to choose at their own pace, free from pressure or judgment. At the heart of the store, where once stood a cold, circular counter that loomed like a throne, now rested a round wooden table, a place where employees and customers could meet eye to eye. No more distance, only conversation and connection. Emma walked slowly through each corner, her gaze soft but contemplative. She gently placed her hand on the glass, the very spot where she had once been ignored. Now, it was no longer a symbol of dismissal. It was the birthplace of change. A newly hired employee approached her quietly and asked, "Ms. Emma, do you think we should rename this space?" Emma smiled gently. She looked around the store, then replied softly, "No need. The name doesn't matter as much as how people feel when they walk out of here. If they feel seen, valued, then any name will be beautiful." And just like that, Langston and Company was reborn, not merely through materials and manpower, but through a new soul, a soul named kindness. 1 week after its quiet reopening, Langston and Company was back in business. There were no banners, no celebrity ribbon cutting, only the soft footsteps and curious eyes of customers who had returned for one unexpected reason: comfort. They couldn't quite explain why, but the atmosphere felt warmer now. The staff smiled sincerely, asked questions without rushing, and introduced each piece of jewelry as if telling a story. No one was judged by the shoes they wore or the hairstyle they had, and that very simplicity made the store feel extraordinary. Emma stepped out from the small office at the end of the hallway. In her hand was a warm cup of tea, and on her wrist, the same mother-of-pearl leather strap watch from that unforgettable day. She had worn it every day since signing the transfer papers, not as a symbol of triumph, but as a reminder, never forget why you started. Today was her birthday. She hadn't told anyone. Emma never liked noisy parties or scripted greetings. But as she returned to her office, something unexpected awaited her. On the desk was a small box wrapped in rustic craft paper. Beside it, a handwritten note. Emma, we know you're not one for grand gestures, so this gift is a quiet one. You once said your watch reminds you of the journey you've taken. So this is to remind you that your journey has inspired many of us along the way. Happy birthday. From the whole team. Emma opened the box. Inside was a simple wooden keychain, hand-carved with the words. The time she took it back, she held the gift silently, resting it in her palm. Her heart tightened, not from sadness, but from the deep stir of something quiet and beautiful. She was no longer alone on her journey. Just then, a young employee passed by the doorway, pausing when he noticed her. He hesitated, flustered. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Emma smiled gently. It's okay, she said softly. Thank you for everything. And in that moment, without flowers, without a party, without any fanfare, Emma received the most meaningful birthday gift of her life. A quiet but profound recognition from hearts that understood. That morning, sunlight poured through the large glass windows, spilling onto the wooden floor in soft, honey-golden streaks. Langston and Company opened its doors like any other day, but inside, it no longer felt like a store. It felt like a space where everyone who entered could breathe easier, smile gently, and feel no need to pretend in order to be treated with dignity. Emma stood in a quiet corner, holding a cup of tea, watching silently. She saw a new staff member carefully adjusting the placement of a ring. She saw an elderly customer being offered a warm cup of coffee and a seat. She saw conversations happening, sincere, uninterrupted by judgment. She stepped to the center of the store, where the cold, towering counter had once stood, now replaced by a round wooden table. She placed her hand on its surface and looked around, as if feeling the heartbeat of the place she'd helped create. A customer approached her, a little hesitant. Are you the manager here? Emma smiled softly. No, she replied. I'm just someone who believes everyone deserves to be treated with respect. And I was lucky enough to be in a position to make that happen. The customer nodded, then quietly walked away with a look of quiet warmth. In a small office at the back, a black and white photo hung on the wall. Emma and her father were standing outside the old watch repair shop from her childhood. Beneath it, a carved wooden plaque read, "It's not where you go that defines who you are, but how you treat others along the way." Emma looked at the photo, then out at the store, now alive, not with noise, but with presence. She knew her journey wasn't over. But in this moment, right now, everything felt exactly as it should be. And if you've ever been underestimated, ever judged for how you look, remember this. True worth doesn't need to be spoken. It's shown in how you choose to treat the world. If this story moved you, leave a comment below. Share how it made you feel. And don't forget to subscribe to join us for more stories that reach into the heart. Because some stories don't need noise. They just leave us quietly changed. We've just witnessed a journey, not one of revenge, but of restoring justice through calm and humanity. Emma never had to raise her voice. She didn't need anyone to speak on her behalf. Through action and through belief in human worth, she transformed a place once known for discrimination into a space of respect and connection. And if you've ever been judged by your appearance, even just once, remember this. Your true value doesn't lie in someone else's gaze. It lies in how you see yourself and how you treat the world. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment below. Share your thoughts about Emma, about Langston and Company, and what you would do if you were in her place. And don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next emotional and meaningful stories. Because some stories are light enough to make us smile and deep enough to make us change. Emma's story leaves us with a powerful lesson. True worth isn't found in appearance, but in how we live, how we confront injustice, and how we treat those around us. In a world where perception is often clouded by glamour, Emma chose to stand firm, with calm, with kindness, and with unwavering integrity. She didn't seek revenge. She didn't scold. She didn't try to prove anything. She simply made things right with clear, principled action. The message of this story is crystal clear. Never judge a person by how they look. And if you've ever been dismissed or made to feel invisible in this world, remember, you don't need to shout to be heard. Your value lies in how you live and how you see yourself. From a personal perspective, I believe we've all been in Emma's shoes at some point, feeling unseen, unrecognized. But it's in those moments that we have a choice, to stay silent and accept it, or to quietly change everything in our own way. Emma chose the latter, and that choice is a powerful inspiration to anyone who's ever felt tired of being overlooked. If this story spoke to you, leave a comment. Share your thoughts about Emma, about her journey, and what you would have done in her place. And don't forget to hit like, subscribe to Toch Story, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next soul-stirring stories to come. Because sometimes, all it takes is one story at the right moment to make us believe in goodness again.